We begin in Gaza, where Israel says it's recovered the bodies of 6 captives, one of which was an American, according to the White House. 23-year-old Hersh Goldberg-Polin has been named as one of the captives whose body has been recovered by the Israeli army. His family confirmed his death in a statement just a short time ago. They've been among the most high-profile families, having met with US President Joe Biden, the Pope, while also having addressed the UN as well as last week's Democratic National Convention. Al Jazeera's Heidi Jo Castro joins us on the line now from Washington, D.C. Heidi, so what more has the White House been saying then about the discovery of these bodies in Gaza?
Yeah, Darren, Biden released an emotional statement talking about Israeli forces discovering these bodies in a tunnel under Rafah. And Biden said, as you mentioned, that one of them was the body of Israeli-American Hersh Goldberg-Polin. Then the statement goes on to describe Goldberg-Polin having just turned 23 years old when he was taken by Hamas from the Nova Music Festival, how he sustained a traumatic injury to his arm during that attack and then was taken to Gaza, last seen in a video released by Hamas in April. Biden went on to say he was devastated and outraged to learn of Goldberg-Polin's death and that he was heartbroken. And then he finished this statement, and I will just quote a little bit of it. He said, "It is as tragic as it is reprehensible. Make no mistake, Hamas leaders will pay for these crimes." Biden goes on to say that he will keep working around the clock for a deal to secure the release of the remaining hostages. And just as you said, Darren, the parents of this young man were especially public in their pleading, not only with Biden, but even with the Pope before the UN, and as you mentioned, before the Democratic National Committee, in which that crowd was so silent, you could hear a pin drop, and then they started chanting, "Bring them back," as the parents made their emotional appeal. And now today confirming the death of their son, saying they were devastated and now seeking privacy.
Yeah, Heidi, and Biden spoke briefly, didn't he, on his optimism for a ceasefire deal. What more did he have to say?
At this moment.
That's right. He did brief reporters, but he didn't release the name of identity of those who were found dead. He's saying that he was waiting for the families to be notified. So that was previously, and he said at the time that he was still optimistic about talks to get a ceasefire deal. He said that it was time for the war to end, time for it to finish. And he said that he had his fingers crossed that the talks in Egypt were ongoing and that leaders had agreed upon the ceasefire proposals as far as the principles go. However, it's notable that this isn't the first time that we've heard from U.S. officials professing that a deal could be just around the bend. We heard the same sort of language several months ago, only for there to be no real progress to materialize. So certainly the U.S. continuing to put diplomatic pressure on Netanyahu, on Hamas to come to the table and get a deal done. And now this development of discovering 6 more of the captives dead in Gaza, and that notably one is an Israeli-American, Hersh Goldberg-Polin, only adds more urgency and pressure to their efforts to secure a ceasefire.
All right, Al Jazeera's Heidi Jo Castro, they're live for us in Washington, D.C. Heidi, thank you. Let's bring in Menachem Klein. He's a professor of political science at the Bar Ilan University and an author on Israeli-Palestine affairs. He joins us live from West Jerusalem. Menachem, so this isn't the first time the Israeli army has discovered the bodies of captives in Gaza. How significant, then, is this latest discovery, and what's it telling us about where the captives fit into Israel's military calculations in Gaza?
Very sad morning indeed. It's not the first time, and we have to wait and see to wait to the investigation results to see who killed these 6 hostages, whether it was the IDF or Hamas that under their hostage that they were responsible for. It's not the first time, and actually, I would say something very, very sad and also conclusive in my view, Netanyahu and the cabinet signed their death sentence by refusing earlier this year to make a hostages deal, a ceasefire. The war games that Israel maintains in Gaza are unachievable, and Israel refuses to get it and to come down to reality. That's the problem, and it costs the life of Israeli hostages.
Okay, so you say that Netanyahu effectively signed the death warrants of those captives being held in Gaza. Is this likely then to put yet more pressure on Netanyahu by the families of the captives who say, look, the longer the war goes on, the less likely the captives will be found alive?
This pressure is ongoing, but Netanyahu and his office organize a counter pressure of hostages' families that support Netanyahu. And actually in Israeli streets, and especially in Jerusalem, where are many demonstrations, there is let's say, a war fight or a street fight between demonstrators against Netanyahu and pro-Netanyahu preconditions of making the hostages deal. Netanyahu organized a counter-protest by his supporters. He is not going to give up very easily. And I'm afraid that as many hostages are killed in Gaza Strip, in the tunnels, the more Netanyahu is against making any concessions to Hamas, most strict to his unachievable war goals, to ending completely with Hamas and even re-educating the Palestinian people of Gaza, actually also to expand the war into the West Bank.
And that's an important point you make, Menachem, because, as you say, there have been months of these demonstrations on the streets in Israel by protesters, by the families to bring the captives home. How will this latest discovery then play into what is an already angry public mood in Israel?
The people of Israel, I was yesterday in Jerusalem streets and demonstrating in favor of an hostages deal. The people are tired and almost desperate to have a deal. They cry to the government to listen to them and make the deal. This is the mood of the deal supporters here in Israel, in Jerusalem. I assume that this morning, we will see more protesters in main streets, Tel Aviv, following the very sad, bad news coming out from Gaza Strip.
Menachem, let me get a final point from you. I mean, President Biden says he's still optimistic that a ceasefire deal can be reached. But how much of a priority is the issue of the captives? Because, as you say, Netanyahu's not stopping the war despite the deaths of 40,000 Palestinians and, of course, many of the Israeli captives.
I'm afraid that President Biden is optimistic, but without any ground for his optimism. Netanyahu, in my view, plays with President Biden and also with the Israeli hostages' families, actually. And he sticks to his war goals and maneuver and plays with the families and President Biden. Maybe Biden considers to go and express his optimism in order to create an optimistic movement towards an agreement, but it has no base on the ground.
Menachem Klein, really good to get your thoughts and your analysis. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for talking to Al Jazeera. Thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.